This has been a pretty long time coming video. I already made a video regarding the A&K M60 on Inbush's 1969 channel, and needless to say, I'm not exactly satisfied with the information I provided, the examples, the accurate history of the actual gun that I may have provided throughout the video. And as you may have noticed, there's a few things that have changed since then. Many things have changed. So I've kind of just decided to give it another go, maybe improve not only the presentation, but the actual information I provide. It's going to be a fairly long video, so I recommend sitting down. Because, yeah, I'm going to probably go a little deeper than I went last time. And a few things that I also want to say. I'm counting on natural light, so maybe throughout the video, things are going to get darker. So, because the window's right there, you know, with the glare. Because I do not have a fucking studio, and I have to do this in my bedroom with my poncho liner in a very funky way. But yeah, as I said, the video is going to be fairly long because I'm also going to delve a bit into the history of the machine gun, the different variants that people may not actually be aware of, and how to improve the gun, talk about other Airsoft M60s that may be relevant to the conversation, and I'll try to make it as educational as possible, since I have fairly strong feelings for this gun and for many of the guns in the reenactment and airsoft world, because I mean, they do not seem like it, but as the video goes by, this may seem like a better option for many people. And yeah, I'm hoping to, make people learn something. Learn something, maybe motivated to do things like this. Well, we'll see. So yeah. Anyways, I want to start by just brief history of the M60 machine gun, and then we'll just get going with the rest. The gun was originally designed from 1952 with prototypes to 1957, and it kind of borrowed aspects of other guns that were already existing at the time. It kind of borrowed the operating system, the gas system and operod of the Lewis gun, or the FG42 if you're a wearable, because they're basically the same thing. And he also borrowed the MG42 top cover, which is an excellent top cover. There's probably more information regarding that on Ian McCollum's Forgotten Weapons channel. If you want to get any more information, go there, honestly. Each gun costed 6,000 USD to actually make them without inflation. Now it would be substantially more. And it fired the 7.62mm NATO round, 7.62 by 51, and had an effective range of 1,100 meters, which is a lot for a gun like this. But at the same time, it was a general purpose machine gun. It was not just a machine gun, so blah blah blah, all that. And it fired at 550 rounds per minute. Well, 550 to 650, something along those lines. The actual gun was adopted in 1957 and went to see prolific use throughout Nam, if you hadn't noticed. But you can still see them up to 1991, Desert Storm, and you can even see them still. I believe I've seen pictures of them in Desert Shield in 2003. But I mean, you can still see them. They're still around, although they do have quirks, some issues. Of course, this machine gun, the base machine gun, as it is a GPMG, it spawned many configurations. For example, you have the M60D, that was for use as a door gun on helicopters and other vehicles. And it was fitted with spade grips. You take the handguard off, you get a new, I'll get to that later. Yeah, and also it spawned, all the other versions that came after the war, which is the M60 E3 that is shortened with a different handguard with an actual grip at the front. Different top covers, different side brackets, different barrels, different bipods, and even then, the Danish still use this machine gun to this day. Not exactly this one, but the M60 E6. So it is still a design that has stuck around for a very long time. Now, for the sake of this video, we will focus only on the Vietnam War pattern of full-sized M60s. We're not going to go any further than that, because that is probably going to get boring, and I don't want to talk about cut-down M60s, because I'm not a cringe lord like a certain guy that I know called Kyo, something like that. I don't know. It's just kind of cringe. He does seals or something. Stupid. Okay, realistically, there actually exist 3 patterns of full-sized M60. Each have very slight differences, so much so that it may be actually kind of hard to tell them apart. But the main differences come down to furniture, such as the stock and the handguard, and little parts like the barrel release lever and others. The first pattern, of course, featured early handguards and buttstocks. The main difference between those is that you would have, for example, the sling swivel would be at the bottom. Similarly, on the handguard, the sling swivel will actually be right there. And it would actually have a hole through it for, I'm assuming, to be some sort of mount. They also had a different style of barrel release lever, or barrel release tab, whatever you want to call it. That style, excuse me, had a few issues regarding accidental dismounting of the barrel, because unlike this model, which is you push out and then you push up to take it out, the early model, you can just push it up and it will come out. There was only a, I forgot the name now, a detent keeping the barrel release in a locked position, which wasn't exactly handy. And seeing the proximity to the charging handle, people sometimes slip, they'll pull the barrel release lever out, pull the barrel out, and it's not exactly, very handy. I think there was an actual incident with an aircraft gun that they lost the barrel that way, and that apparently was a bit of a wake-up call, although I do not have many sources to substantiate that, but I have heard of something along those lines, but again, don't quote me on it. However, on the side also, in the 1960s, all M60 machine guns were adopted and were mounted with a magazine clamp on the side right here. Magazine clamp, magazine bracket, whatever you want to call it. These were meant for a reusable clip-on magazine bag. Clip-on magazine bag that would fit just 100 to 150 rounds of ammunition, and you could just go out and refill it, and it had a zipper on the side that would allow you to take it on and off. Later on, it was replaced with basically a tab, but I'll get to that a bit later on. That bracket actually is fairly well known for being able to take a C-ration can on the side, which is something you see fairly often. It's not a rare occurrence, but it's not the most common thing either. And that was mostly done to actually assist in feeding, because if you have the belt going straight down, it may actually cause problems when it comes to actually feeding the rounds into the chamber. But having a round surface that angles of the belt a little bit usually would ease a little bit the task and actually make the gun a little more reliable. Also, it must be noted that in 1964, actually, they went out and changed the bipod yoke. Originally, they had a stamped bipod yoke that was then actually replaced with a milled bipod yoke, because the stamped one was not exactly the most solid thing ever, and you're probably going to see in the pictures, it looks fairly flimsy. Maybe it wasn't, but if they decided to change it, there most likely was a reason for it, and I'm sure it was fragility and likely maybe cost to an extent, because it is a fairly complex looking stamping. Now, moving to one of the most commonly seen patterns of the NAM is the 1967 revision pattern, introducing actual elements that will be seen just everywhere after the war. But basically elements that are going to be all too familiar to anyone that has actually seen one of these in a movie, or in a museum, or at an event, whatever. The furniture changed a little bit. Now you don't have the hole in the middle of the handguard, and you have a sling swivel that is at a 90-degree angle, pointing straight up, rather than not having one like the previous version, or being at a 45-degree angle like the later version. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The buttstock was this. It became the final version of the buttstock, having the sling swivel at the top rather than the bottom, which at the same time kind of makes sense, because having the sling swivels at the bottom, that kind of implies carrying the thing like a rifle. No, you're not going to carry this thing like a rifle, because it's not going to be exactly the most comfortable thing to do. So these improvements were likely for the better. They also had a change regarding the barrel release lever, going from the early style that was just you raise up and the barrel comes out, to a style where you push in, you push up, and then you can pull out the barrel, pull back, all that stuff, which was arguably substantially better. One thing that is also interesting to keep in mind is that Not all guns were instantly retrofitted with modern parts, because in 1970 manuals of the M60, I got an October 1970 user manual for the M60, and you can see they still, mention both patterns of barrel release lever, meaning even by the 70s, both patterns were still around, and you need to account for training on them, which is, fairly funny. And lastly, this is kind of a touchy subject, but it's the 1970 pattern. It's the 1970 revision pattern. It introduced changes that will be just the definitive changes for the full-sized M60 from then on. That includes the handguard with the sling swivel at the 45-degree angle, same stock, and improved more ergonomic safety that I'll put some images wherever they fit, because turning the whole thing around may be a little hard. We'll show it later whenever we can. And it also added something that we all see, which is a plate for bandoliers, because they figured out having a stupid clamp on the side that is expensive, needs springs, and needs its own very specific box to actually work with. Well, it wasn't the most convenient thing ever, so they decided to move on to something that can actually take bandoliers. And for example, here we got a 1970 bandolier, and this thing just, if I can actually do it on camera without it getting fucky, which is a miracle, if that's the case, there you go. It would fit on the side. You can open the thing, it goes backwards actually, and, pull your ammo out, put it there, and have a more convenient way to carry ammunition rather than having it wrapped around the receiver of the M60 or on a loose belt around your arms. This was a substantially better idea than having the stupid clamp on the side. Although the clamp is cool, that's something I'm going to give it to it. It is quite a cool piece, but this thing does not come off. Holy shit. There we go. But yeah, it brought this to the table. Now, the thing is, that pattern of gun is just not seen enough. I have not seen an actual picture of any GI in the NOM with a pattern 1970 machine gun. Never. So, by that logic, again, this is just what I've seen, I wouldn't use one of those. And I'll get to that later, but most guns that you will find in the market are 1970 pattern guns, which is a bit of an issue. But I'll get to that later. You can find actual pictures of the 1972 revision pattern, I'm getting mixed up, but that version. In 1972, I think there's a picture of a 101st Airborne machine gunner in a stateside training event or field event with the 1970 pattern machine gun, but that's one of the only ones that you can find that is an actual period dated photo of that pattern being in any use by US forces. The reasoning why you may be able to find, for example, pieces or actual machine guns in that pattern in Vietnam could be because when the US were de-escalating the war, they were bombarding the fucking South Vietnamese with supplies that were giving them a lot of gear, including new M16s, which may be why you may find trapdoor buttstocks in Nam. Not in pictures, not in use by US military forces, but in storage, for example. So that may be why you may find those handguards in Vietnam, rather than, actually see them in use, which would be a very, very late war thing to do. And even then, again, there's very little pictures of that even happening once at the very least. At least that I have seen. If anyone has any other examples, I'd gladly take a look at it. So if you want to send me an email or anything actually providing evidence, I'd actually really like to see it, because it would be quite an interesting thing. Now, the gun, despite its numerous issues, including bolt pinning or long-term durability issues of components like the receivers that tended to crack or to bend out of shape, or runaway issues due to sear engagement being kind of poor after, a substantial amount of rounds fired, training issues where people would close the top cover on a bolt being forward and break or damage the feeding arm, which is something that was kind of improved with the later pattern machine guns having an improved top cover. That would not cause those issues. Or damaging the charging handle because, they decided to, they charge the gun and then they pull the trigger and the bolt goes forward, drags the carrying handle with it and just kind of snaps it. That was kind of also a bit of an issue, training issue too. it still went on to see service for many, many decades because it was an interesting design. It was a field-proof design. It was reliable. People liked it, especially those NAM vets, even though the ones that came after Panama or Grenada or all that stuff, they tend to like them a little less because by then the guns were really worn out. Yeah, and even then, it went out to see, well, used by many forms of media, really. Many movies, many series, many video games. And it kind of just really became one of the most recognizable guns ever. You see this, you think Rambo instantly. Like, it's not really hard to think about it. And I don't know, these just are really, really cool guns. And maybe one day I'll get to actually handle one, which would be, honestly, quite cool. But yeah, that's kind of just the rundown of the history. I know it's been a little spotty because I'm a little over the place because it's kind of late right now. But yeah, maybe one day I'll try to fucking do a little better. But for now, this will most likely do because I still have work to do on this thing, hopefully. Well, now we can get on to the actual Airsoft replicas themselves. There are 5 companies that have made them, at least the full-size version, with varying degrees of accuracy, okay? There's some that are really good, there's some that are pretty bad. You have Top and Asahi. Those are most often regarded as classic airsoft guns because, you know, they come from way back then. We're talking 80s, 90s manufacturer. Japanese made plastic metal builds. They have kind of funky lowers. The Top doesn't have like an ejection port. The Asahi one, I don't think it actually has a button to press the barrel release lever out. They kind of use like hex screws rather than, you know, there's Allen screws there, which kind of looks kind of fucking weird. Funky trunnions. And although very good guns in the wrong regard, they kind of do leave a lot to be desired when it comes down to fidelity to the real thing externally. Now, Inokatsu and LCT M60s are often regarded as the golden grail of the Airsoft M60s. But, before you fucking throw a stroke there, they kind of do fall flat when it comes to just seeing them as a viable alternative for perfectionists, okay? Charging $1.50 or more for a gun that still has inaccuracies like a weird finish on the top cover or funky markings, an incorrect trigger assembly, well, at least the trigger assembly spring, or an incorrect trigger assembly in the Inokatsu because it has a fucking ambi safety, which is not exactly period accurate, not at all. It's kind of just not necessarily insulting, but like, if you pay $500 for something, $1.50 for a gun, that is basically a toy gun. Like, wouldn't you expect a bit of a higher standard? That's just me, at least. Because I may sound very critical of these guns, even if they do actually have certain advantages and certain very good things about them. The build quality is usually very good. But, like, the crazy money they're asking for, I'd expect things to be a little better. Because, again, you're charging just an enormous amount of money. We're talking about, like, how much? Like 2 minimum wage salaries for one gun? And that gun is still a 1970 pattern gun with mistakes that you're not going to be able to use for, you know, perfectionist reenactment out of the box. That's, I don't know, just kind of irks me a little bit, you know what I mean? And this kind of rings particularly true when I looked at some very painful limited edition LCT M60s that I found online, where it seems that they've just taken all of the finish off of the body, and they've called it worn, and then they decided to sell them for $2.50, which, I mean, no, just fuck off, no way, like, just making me angry, because I think, to an extent, we can compare, like, guns, like LCT guns, or at least the LCT M60 to Shoei. Shoei is I don't know why Japs have this obsession with German stuff. I cannot understand why. But they make very extremely high quality guns, handmade, G43s, MG42s, extremely well finished, extremely well detailed, and they do cost around, well, not maybe a bit more than an LCT M60. but those do show a level of craftsmanship and an actual level of study and reference of real machine guns that the LCT and the Katsus just do not show. Because again, those guns are still 1970s pattern, and others are still not the pattern that you can use for, well, realistically, any thorough part of the war. Because again, you cannot really find any actual picture of those being in use. In I think maybe I found one, but I'm actually unsure if it's a reenactment or not, which is a photo of 2 Marines in Hue City. And that M60 does have the angled sling swivel, but that revision wasn't done until 1970, so I'm a little confused as to what exactly that is. But again, I'll leave that to interpretation. And then, after all those guns, there's the Ugly Duckling, which is the A&K M60, okay? The A&K M60 is literally the biggest meme in regards to the M60. Like, it's bad, especially when knowing that actual plastic, neon green children's toy M60s are more accurate than this. Well, at least the base gun. I am not kidding. This is an actual fucking... this is an actual thing. Okay, the best way I can define the A&K M60 VN is an M63 that is cosplaying as an M60 Vietnam, or a full-sized M60, because in the whole base gun there's a whopping 5 parts on the whole gun that are Vietnam. A gargantuan whopping 5 parts, those being the stock, good, the carrying handle, nice, the handguard, the barrel, and the charging handle. That's it. Everything else, no. Everything else is wrong on this gun. Even the receivers are originally M63. Even the receiver and the trunnion are both M63. A&K made also their own M63, so it makes sense from an economy point of view to just reuse those parts. But Jesus Christ, it really is fucking bad. I don't understand that setting up manufacture for new receivers, new trunnions, new tail covers, new triggers is gonna be a little hard, pretty expensive. But fucking hell, it's still kind of disappointing to see that such low standards is virtually accepted by manufacturers, like people that are going to produce a gun and label it as a Vietnam thing. Again, I may be very nitpicky, but I mean, it's true. It's just kind of sad, really. And people will buy them still, which probably just encourages them to have an even lower standard. But again, that's just ranting. The bottom line is that the A&K is good from afar, but far from being good. That's something I said in the previous video, and I'll just say it again. Despite this, the A&K and its use is actually very widespread in both the airsoft community and reenactors, because, well, this is especially in Europe, when we're finding an actual M60. Well, no, you're not going to find one, at least not a working one, and I've never seen a deactivated one. Unless you rent a Blackfire one, and even then the Blackfire ones are more often than not going to be the 1970 pattern. So, yeah, so these are very, frequently seen in the hands of reenactors. At least, the ones that can afford to pay a dumb amount of money for a gun that is still wrong. And now, having said that so many people use these, so many people like these, so many people have used these for so many years and they still like them. Okay, I do not want to throw shade to those that actually have one and use them for reenactments and haven't modified them. I don't want people to feel bad about their guns, their equipment, that kind of stuff. I just want to make this video to I want to remake this video to provide proof that things can be done to this gun to make it look decent. Even if you're missing half your brain like I do. I'm a fucking idiot and I managed to do it, so why can't you? And just kind of encourage people to go out and start working on these builds, because it's fun, honestly. It is not super expensive. There's some parts that really are expensive. I can think of one. And the others, well, the rest is really just a lot of elbow grease and just working on it day and night. But it's not expensive. It just takes time and passion. And I just want to motivate people to actually go out and do that and have rewarding experiences and actually be able to improve their impressions further, because this can be a huge plus to anyone that is really trying to get very serious about this kind of stuff. Not trying to imply that those that have these are not serious about their hobby, but just saying that more can be done, and it's not a whole lot harder than, you know, what one may actually think. Now, knowing that, we're gonna come closer and look at my own A&K, which is, you know, this one. After, I don't know, 5 hours talking about the history and, you know, the other airsoft guns. Okay, I bought this gun in summer 2019, for $250, I believe, which is not a bad price for these, seeing they tend to command twice the price for a brand new gun. But surprisingly, they're actually getting harder and harder to find. I think it's because they actually stopped manufacturing these. But even then, they will pop up on second-hand sites for a decent price. Because most of the time, like, people end up buying these because they think it's a very cool thing. Wow, it's an M60, it looks cool. And then they end up figuring out that the build quality is not exactly excellent, or they're dissatisfied with the ergonomics, or they just don't like carrying the weight. And most of the time, these are just sold for fairly cheap because people just don't want them. And that's fine to you, because, you know, you may be able to actually get a pretty decent deal on this. So they're not really the rarest site on such sites. Mine was actually pretty beat up altogether, and it was barely functioning, and actually did need an internal tune-up. One thing I will note, yeah, the gearbox is out, because I just have an event coming up, and I cannot quite be fucked to carry a gearbox that is going to do nothing and look very weird, because, I mean, we know that the M60 is an open bolt light machine gun, and, well, general purpose machine gun. You know, if it's empty, I believe it's going to be better than having a weird block there, and it's going to look better in pictures to have nothing in there rather than actually having, you know, a block of a gearbox inside. Just thought it would be a little better. This gun has been a bit of a personal project for over a year and a half now, and I've been adding to it every now and then when I feel brave enough to actually, you know, modify the gun, because it is daunting to, you know, just start such a huge project, and especially when you think, oh my god, I'm gonna break something and I'm never gonna find this part again, and, you know, you can get very stressed regarding that. But yeah, and I've been just adding as I learn more, as I search more, and as I get the opportunity to find parts. I've been trying to actually get it into 1967 revision configuration. It's pretty close. It's getting there. There's like 2 things that I want to change still, and it would be near, well, 3 things, and it would be perfect. But, you know, that's still a bit of a long way there, because some of those parts are kind of fucking expensive, and it's gonna be a bit hard really to complete the build. But, you know, in due time, things are gonna be changed and done. So yeah, actually, we're going to talk about the rest of the gun now. Just a bit of a closer look. So we're gonna do front to back, starting by the front of the gun. That being, well, you know, the whole barrel assembly. You got a fairly hefty flash hider. I've heard things about the flash hider being the wrong dimensions. Personally, I do not think it's a huge deal, at least not from there. I wouldn't change it for a real one, because 1, real ones are fucking expensive. 2, you would have to match the color and the finish to the rest of the barrel assembly, which is not exactly the most easy task on the planet. And you would have to tap either the actual flash hider or the barrel, which is a task that I cannot accomplish, because the only complicated tools I have in my possession are a set of files. So yeah, that's not something I'm going to do. Then we have the bipod, which I'll come back to that thing later. We can see it's a milled bipod, so post 1964, full length barrel. We have our gas cylinder tube with our castle nut. We actually have, well, here's the first real part that I put on this gun, being the gas cylinder nut or screw, because the original one is, I mean, it is a nut, yeah, but it's not exactly the same design of nut. It doesn't have a hole through the middle for you to actually put safety wire through it, which was commonly done because the other thing comes undone. Same with this one, but I decided to just leave that out. So yeah, that's kind of one of the first real part that I put on my M60. It was like $10. So it's a part that I would like encourage you to fit, because it's not super hard to fit either. But yeah, that's kind of that. Now we come to the handguards. Well, We got plastic lower handguard with kind of texture like the real thing. Heat shield on top, as we should. And when we turn this thing around, if I can do it without, getting too out of frame, we have the sling swivel aiming, 90 degrees upwards, which is what you would want for a 1967 revision gun. This was a fairly easy task to do because, originally it did come as, a 1970 revision gun rather than 1967 gun. So, the thing was at an angle that way. To fix this, I just, took the thing out, fill the hole here, which, you can see it there, but when you actually put a sling swivel on it, you don't see it. So it's, it's pretty good. I did repaint it and file it a little bit to make it fit, match the rest of the profile of the handguard. But that's just that. And then I just drilled a new hole. I just pierced it with a fucking screwdriver because I couldn't be fucked. It's very soft plastic. It's not really like a super hard plastic. Just get it and turn it for a while and you pierce through. And you can just, the inside of the top of the handguard has heat shields, which is basically a very thin chrome piece of aluminum that you can literally cut with scissors. Make a new hole on the other side, fit it, and just, there you go. It's a very easy modification to do that. I would recommend anyone to actually go out and do it. Honestly, it's really not challenging. And it does add a lot, because then you're a step closer to an actual Vietnam War gun, which is kind of cool. Now, one thing that you may notice straight away with this gun is the fact that it has screws. Well, the real gun would not have screws, as you may have figured out. It would have rivets. And this is a problem that kind of plagues the whole gun. You can see screws here where you would have rivets for the trunnion, you have screws for the handguard, you have screws for the handguard brackets, you have screws for some of the part, the feeding tray, you have screws for the feed tray cover. Yeah, there's a lot of parts that have screws, and also the carrying handle. So that's an issue I may try to resolve one day, either by finding some sort of cover that I can put on top of the screws and pop out when I need to tighten them, because that's something I'll come back to later. Because filling them with epoxy is not an option, because then how do you put them back on? It's one of those things that I think I may have to deal with live with on this gun, which I don't see it as that big of an issue. It bothers me, but I don't know. I may look into actually solving that one day, but I don't think it's going to be a very obvious solution, because finding a specific size cap for these screws is not going to be exactly, easy. Now, there's the carrying handle, which is correct. Well, at least the carrying handle itself is. Not the carrying handle lug, because a carrying handle is basically two parts. You have the handle itself, and you have a lug that actually attaches, which is why you have two screws there. Originally, it would have been, I think, rolled pins or rivets. Not rivets, actually. I think they actually were just blind pins. I'm not quite sure, actually. But just correct me on that if you actually know that. Yeah, no, the lug is incorrect, because the lug I actually think is from an M60 E3, because this whole thing would have a lug right here. A lug that would go about this high. You can maybe still see the remnants there. I'll probably post a picture whenever. And that would stop the carrying handle from going below there. It would be stuck at a very horizontal angle, parallel to the ground, basically. And that is not exactly right. It should be able to bend all the way down. And that's again a very simple modification. Just take it out, take a file to it, and then get this part is steel, so you're gonna need I think I use Ballistol blue ink solution. For steel, get an earbud, put it on top, put a bit of oil on top to seal it, and you get an actual carrying handle that moves in an adequate manner, so it doesn't look too off. So again, that's a very easy modification to do. Now, the barrel release lever is also a fairly simple thing to do. Originally, it had a lightning cut, like here, it would have a rectangle. Just a cut, really. It's nothing else. That wouldn't be on Vietnam War M60s. Again, that I think is an M63 modification. So what you do on this is you just take a file, you file it off, just file the actual thing flat. Then you get some sandpaper, you smooth it, you repaint it, and you can call it quits, really. Oh, and one thing that I forgot to mention is that I actually added markings on, well, I didn't do it myself because I'm an idiot, but I got them marked. I got a marking done on the carrying handle, I got a marking done on the actual trunnion, making this a Marymount machine gun. I got marking on the charging handle, and marking on the charging handle guide, and a marking on this side of the trigger assembly. These markings, at least on this part, this part, this part, and this part, are basically stock numbers, because those parts were meant to be replaced if something happened to them. So it's not a serial number, it's not like German guns, or any other gun. And I'll get to that later, but there's also fire and safe markings on this side, because I'll get to that later before I get too heated. Yeah. Now, getting to the trunnion itself, it was also an M60 3-part. What a surprise! How amazing. It would have a hole here in the middle that I filled with epoxy, and then I repainted the whole gun. Very, very easy to do. Just you need a syringe, some epoxy, put it in there, make sure it doesn't, go too over the actual hole. If it does, just like get some sandpaper and sand it smooth. It's not a very hard task. Again, very simple. Yeah, honestly, that's really all the modification you had to do to the trunnion. If you want to fit original handguards, that I'll get to that later, it's not a really good idea. You will have to file down either the actual trunnion or the handguards for them to fit, because I did check that. Now, the rear sight. I have the rear sight that came with the gun being this one. I don't know if it comes clear enough on camera, because it was a bit far away. Yeah, I mean, you can see the difference. You have a peephole, and on these you will have a U-notch, or a V-notch, whatever you want to call it. Even though mine is a V-notch, but realistically you would actually have more of a very square notch. I replaced mine with, I got lucky, I got pretty lucky. I got a top rear sight for $30 on an Italian site, I think, an Airsoft site. I forgot the name of it, because they didn't have any of them in stock, so even if I knew, it wouldn't do much help. But yeah, this, again, M60 3-part, M60 3-sight. Maybe, I mean, you can have fun and try to convert this into the actual rear sight. I don't think it would be a super hard thing to do if you have a Dremel. And instead of having to buy a new part, you can just modify this if you want to have this for cheap rather than going the full way and getting a correct sight. You can still modify this, just get it out of the way. Yeah, because getting an LCT sight is $130 for a fucking sight, when you can find originals for less. So yeah, I understand if people want to just modify that instead of just getting a brand new sight. So it's perfectly fair to just modify that, in my opinion, unless you want to be a perfectionist and an idiot like me and get one of these. Next we have, let me check my script. We have the feature cover. Okay, big issue with this gun, and one of the biggest thing that pops out when you see one of these is the top cover, or the feed tray cover. Why? Because once more, unsurprisingly, it's an M60 3-part. And the differences are quite noticeable, okay? It's not one of those things that you can just brush off. No. You see them. You see if it has a wrong cover. Why? Because it has a bit of a bracket back here, a bit of a ridge back here, and has like a bump, like a protrusion on this side, which realistically it is for the actual feeding arm to move a bit smoothly, a bit further away without destroying the top cover, which is something that was done after when in improved versions of the M60, not on this gun though. So to modify this thing, I had to, it's again fairly easy task, it just takes time. I filled the protrusion out with epoxy, the whole thing, sealed this side so there wouldn't be any epoxy leaking through the other side. Once it was dry, I spent, I don't know, 4 hours of my fucking life filing away at it with a flat file. It was a dumb amount of time, but it was worth it. You can barely tell there was anything there which is kind of the idea really, and it came out pretty good. I did the same thing on here, except I didn't have to put in the epoxy because it's just a ridge really. You just need to like file it down, sand, make sure it's smooth, and that's it. To refinish it, again, one thing with the M60s, well, at least the top covers, is that they seem to have been painted. They do not seem to have been blued, although maybe some were actually blue because you can see them with a bit of a purple like hue going on, but most of them seem to have been painted black gloss. So what I did to mine is I put one layer of a Krylon ultra flat black paint, and then I put just literally store brand black gloss paint. Got an oily rag with 3-in-1 oil, wiped it until it was polished and shiny, and the patina has come by its own. Because one thing that one of my fucking pet peeves when it comes to M60 top cover, especially when it's the M63 cover out of the A&K, people are gonna just go out, take sandpaper, just file it, and it's gonna look like dog shit. Why? Because the paint did not wear like that on real M60s. It kind of just blotched off. It didn't like scratch off in 1,000 little lines like sandpaper does. So for the love of God, do not sand your top cover, because it's going to look dumb, especially if it's the wrong pattern of top cover. Like if it was the right pattern, maybe I'll let it pass. But when it's just the wrong pattern and sanded down in a way that looks bad, it's pretty sad. It's not, yeah, I don't know how to put it in words, but it's no bueno. What did happen is that the top covers, they were made out of aluminum, which is also, I think, an issue with the LCT, because I think on the LCT is steel, which is why would you do that? The aluminum wouldn't hold paint for shit, so it would kind of also, as I said, blotch off, and that kind of leads to, from what it seems, M60s with a top cover where it's bare. But yeah, it's not scratched off, it's kind of blotched off. So don't go out and sand it flat, because again, it would be kind of shitty and not exactly good. Okay, again, no hard feelings if you've done that, but just for future reference, I wouldn't do that if you want your gun to look anything close to the real thing. I was gonna say something that I fucking forgot because I'm an idiot. Jesus Christ. Well, yeah, the patina on this gun at least just came from me wrapping belts around it, and it kind of just wore out by its own, which is good. It's something I want to do. I don't want to like go out and artificially wear it out, because it would be a bit, sucky. It wouldn't be very authentic if I went out and purposely wore it out. The thing about this top cover, at least top covers that you modify in this way, is that you won't be able to have a completely naked or unpainted cover, because if that was the case, you would see, the epoxy, which in my case I use transparent epoxy, there, which would look kind of dumb, really. So, yeah, just something to keep in mind. But it is a part that you need to get sorted if you want your machine gun to look good. Honestly, the modification for this costs you a set of files if you don't have any, paint, which is like $10, a spray can, and epoxy, which I got mine for $3 at the hardware store. It is not hard. And it's not expensive. It may be a little hard because you do need to be patient. You need to make sure the thing's cured. You need to spend a few hours filing away at it. But it's not impossible. So really, I recommend you guys to go out and do it, because it's worst case scenario. You just fucking send it to me and I will do it. But it really is a part of that. It really adds a lot once it's well done and accurate, really. Now the receiver. The receiver is also M63 for one small detail. The third hole. The M63 had only 2 holes, while the actual Vietnam War M60s had 3. So again, super simple thing. Do it yourself or get a friend to do it. I got my buddy Luke to do it for me because he's fucking epic. And it came out perfectly fine. It's like the same as the others. And just make a hole, repaint the receiver, and it's done. It's perfect. You don't need to do anything else to it. Now, the biggest and most expensive part that you will have to get if you want this gun to be period correct is the trigger assembly. And I've seen people time to time go out and try to convert the original pistol grip of the trigger assembly, which is this one, which is an insult to God's green earth, because this is pretty bad, not gonna lie, because this is again an M60 E3 pistol grip. You can tell the difference straight away. It is blatant, you don't have to hide it. This is pretty bad, honestly. This is also one of the worst parts of the gun. If you change this and this, I would. If you don't want to do anything else other than these two, it's fine. It would be perfect. But these two parts are, if you leave them as they are, it does kind of really bring down the look of the whole gun. So yeah, I've seen people try to 3D print a new body for it. It still looks weird because you can see there's a difference, particularly in this area here. You can tell this thing, or this trigger assembly, is a, you know, the housing is plastic with metal reinforcements inside instead of, you know, being just the grip that is plastic with the whole metal build on the outside. It doesn't have the ambi trigger, which, I mean, arguably you could probably file this off, but even then the safety style is still different. Yeah, there's really no real way around it, not yet. There's still a need for a trigger assembly like this. Again, I wouldn't go with an original, because original I don't think is going to fit, first off, and then I don't think it may have a very good synergy with it actually like touching the micro switch on the gearbox. If you want it to be a functional gun, maybe if you don't want it to be a functional gun, you can just get it and mount it in there however you can, and just leave it as is. But even then, that piece is I don't know, $500 complete, and well, maybe not 500, but maybe like 300 or something along those lines. But even then, $300 for that is still a lot. So I mean, you can do it. I'm sure it can be fitted, but I just don't see the point. I personally broke down and I got the LCT assembly. It fits fairly well, honestly. I just had to take 2 screws out of the underside of the body, which there's like 3 screws holding in a connector that connects to the gearbox itself. Let's see if I can actually get the gearbox out. There it is. There's a connector down here that fits with these 3 prongs, and those 3 screws underneath actually hold that connector in place. So I just took 2 out, left a solid one there, and for now it seems to have worked well enough, so I'm not too worried about it. It fits fine. It's not hard to put it in, so it's a modification that I would recommend, even though it is like $130 for one of these, if you find them. I got mine off of WCG or WGC, one of those, which I always fucking get them wrong. And it still took them 2 months to actually ship it to me, and it still took a month for it to arrive to my house, because, you know, shipping from Hong Kong is not exactly the most easy thing on the planet. So yeah, it did take a while. It was expensive. I don't expect everyone to go out and get one, because again, it's a very expensive piece for what it is. But I just had to have it. I just had to have the right pistol grip for my gun. And with that, there's also the detail of the trigger assembly retaining spring, which will be a flat piece of spring. Even on the A&K is wrong, on the LCT is wrong, on the Eno is wrong, on the top is wrong, on the Asahi is wrong. I think there's no gun that has the right leaf spring. So I just bought an original. It was $8 because the one I got was bent, and when they get bent, they get very loose, and people don't like, you know, getting a spring that is meant to kind of hold your whole trigger assembly loose. Because I mean, there's stories about people in Nam losing the trigger assembly because that thing getting loose, and then once that thing gets loose and falls off, the only thing holding your trigger is a very loose pin. So it was not frequent, but there's stories about people just going to the jungle and looking down at the gun, and my pistol grip is gone in the last 8 miles of rock. So it's not exactly the most convenient thing ever. Of course, the A&K came with the M60 E3 style of spring and pin, which would have a hollow pin with a spring and a pin integrated in a way that when you push it in, the pin kind of locks in place into the other pin, kind of like the the double pin assembly of the top cover. Basically, like a big pin with a smaller retaining pin inside. Again, I got an original for $8. It is a pain in the ass to fit because the dimensions are not the same on this thing. Originally, you would kind of like tuck it in and then fold it down. You're not going to be able to do this on this gun because the receiver is too wide, so it's not going to fit. So what you have to do to get this to fit is you fit this first, and then you just pull the spring outwards and pull it down in a way that it actually matches there. I don't know if that makes sense. Basically, you have to pull it back, pull it down, get it to fit, and then just push forward. You need an insane amount of strength to actually do that. It is dumb. But yeah, that's one of the only ways to get it to fit. So, I mean, I did it, and taking it out is also a gigantic bitch. But I seldom have to do it since it's not a part that needs to be taken out often. So, yeah. The only modification that I had to do to it is I had to file down kind of just the top of it because it was too wide for it to actually fit in there. Other than that, it's not a very hard part to fit, honestly. Also, on that note, one of the things that I did also do to most of the furniture on the gun is I refinish it. I just repainted it with gloss paint and then polished it with a rag. That includes the top cover, the buttstock, the trigger assembly, and the handguard, giving them a bit more of a shine, a bit more of a gloss look to them, rather than being just matte black like they are on, I think, all of the guns. But actually, the SR has fairly glossy furniture, which is really good, actually, and I think the top does as well. But yeah, it does improve the look of the gun a lot, honestly. Now, once that is out of the way, there's the... Wait, no, actually, this is something else that I forgot to mention about the LCT being fucking jokers. LCT got the sense of the safety wrong. What I'm trying to say is, you know, on a real M60, this position, that way, is fire. This is safe. On the LCT grip, for some godforsaken reason, is the opposite. On the LCT, when it's like this, it's on fire. And when it's like this, it's unsafe. Which I paid 130 fucking bucks for a pistol whip that is still wrong. Okay, okay. Not angry. Chill. But yeah, that's just a bit of a fucking meme, honestly. Like, a bit disappointing. Again, not exactly the most highest of standard, but you know, I just let that slide because I still have the right looking grip, and that's all that matters. Now there's the charging handle. Nothing really rare regarding that. One thing that I will note is the charging handle does sometimes get loose. So taking it out is very easy. You just take the stock out. You take the guide out, which is you take the screw out. You can pull the thing out and get this to, like, I believe here, and then you can just pull everything out. And just tighten it with a wrench screw, because there's a wrench screw right there. And yeah, that will prevent you from losing the thing. And also, you have to be mindful about, you know, how far it sticks out, because the amount of guns that I've seen with this part broken is high. Okay, there's many of them that have been broken that way, so it's something to keep into account. Either way, they work fine, honestly. They're steel as well, so you have to look out for corrosion, which is something I would recommend, because mine did come with a little corroded, because the guy didn't give a shit about it, but yeah. Something that I also forgot to mention is... okay, there we go. Well, there's the lack of clamp, because if I'm going to go air shooting, I'm going to have my... oh, where did I put it? The actual, you know, magazine plate clamp thingy for bandoliers, because getting a clamp is about $400 for the clamp. Without knowing if it's going to fit, without knowing how I'm going to engineer me a fucking magazine for it to actually fit in place, unless I had to get the actual, you know, the magazine I mentioned previously, and I put an image of it, to actually put my, you know, my magazine, the Airsoft magazine inside and have it work, which that would mean about, I don't know, $500 for the whole thing, and then I still need to check if it fits, and I still need to check if it clears the hole there. Yeah, that's not something I'm going to do anytime soon, because, I mean, $500 is not, you know, pocket money. So, for now, I just don't have anything on there, honestly. I think I've seen a few guns with nothing on there, but, yeah, that is a glaring issue, and that is one of the things that I do want to address when I end up, perhaps one day finishing this build as... you know, an actual revision of 1967 M60 machine gun. It's going to take a while, it's going to take some time, but, you know, one step at a time, I guess. Also, the thing that I also wanted to mention about this gun being wrong, even after all this time, is that the The LCT, the safety of the LCT, the lever itself is also the wrong model of lever for a 1967 gun. It's the safety lever for a 1970 pattern or revision gun. So yeah, that's also something that I want to replace, because I'm guessing when I replace it, it may actually work correctly, as in, you know, having the right fire in safe positions. But yeah, that's also a thing that's a bit iffy. It's just the detail. I know it's just the fucking safety switch, but I mean, I want to have it, like, have the right one. So one day I'll look out for one of those. But yeah, that's something that I wanted to mention, because I'm not gonna be honest. And last but not least, there's, well, not last. There's a few things that I still need to have to mention, but there's the buttstock. I haven't done anything to it other than refinishing it. I kind of had an attempt at refinishing the butt plate a while back by bluing it. Bluing didn't come out too good. I had to fucking remove it. But when I removed it, it left a very nice patina on it, so I kind of just left it as is. So yeah, that's really the only thing I did to it. One thing that I did do to the receiver, though, well, on the inside of the receiver, under the stuff, is I put weights. I put, I'm sure we all know the like big lead weights that you can find on like Springer airsoft guns, Springer airsoft shotguns, especially, that have them in the grip or in the gun itself, or on like Springer guns you have in the magazine, and they usually put weights in there. I just got like a bunch of them, taped them together, and I must have added like 1.5 kilograms at the back of the stock, on the back of the gun at least, just so I could kind of balance the gun and add a bit more weight, because the gun did come out at like 8.5 kilos, something along those lines. So it must be around 10.5, 11, with the gearbox in, with all the bits in. It should be around 10.5. And then you put the ammo in, and you put the belts in, and it's probably gonna get to 12, something like that. It's still fairly heavy, but it's a bit better balanced, because carrying this thing as front heavy as it is a pain. Because I also don't use slings, because I don't like to put too much pressure on these parts, because I don't fucking trust them, simple as. So yeah, any way that I can, you know, get the gun to be more balanced is honestly appreciated. Yeah, and one thing that I could have forgotten to mention, but I of course didn't, because I'm a genius, is the color of the gun. Of course, the gun wasn't, you know, great when I got it. It was more of the black of, for example, the trigger assembly that you can probably see down there, or maybe it can be seen, I'm not sure, but the inside of the gun, this area here, has not been painted, because of course I'm not going to paint the inside, because there's going to be a gearbox in there. That was the original color. It was a kind of a glossy, not really matte black color. And it was not glossy, but it wasn't matte either. It was a bit in between. And that is, again, not exactly right, because the original guns were parkerized and phosphated, which is kind of the same thing, really, but or at least a very similar thing. I had been hesitating on actually painting the gun for a long time, because I was afraid of finding the right paint. I was afraid of it having the right finish. I was afraid of it getting worn out weird. But I decided to, you know, fuck it, and I was gonna do it either way. Because one of the main issues when you try to repaint a gun and you want to like simulate a finish, is the fact that finishes, this is an Uzi, have different shades. They have different ways. You can see that in the light. Not everything is uniform. Not everything has the same color. Not everything has the same finish on it. And that is something you're not really going to achieve on a gun with paint. You may be actually able to achieve it, but the thing is, then it's going to get worn out. And when it gets worn out, it's going to look really weird, because you have the artificial wear from the paint, and you have the actual wear from actual use, and that's going to cause scratches, and you're going to be able to see the different layers of paint. You're going to start seeing different areas blotching, and that is well, kind of, you know, not exactly great looking overall. So yeah, that's one of my main concerns, painting it. But you know, as I said, I decided fuck it, and I was going to do it, and it did come up pretty good. I'm quite satisfied with the shade of gray that I managed to achieve. I used Fosco Panzer, not Panzer Grau. I used Grau Blau paint, industrial spray paint. It is really good. It has very good coverage. I think it's like $10 a can. And I still have plenty of it after doing the whole gun. A few coats. I think I did like 3 coats of the receiver, 2 coats the turn-in, 1 very light coat for the heat shield, 2 or 3 coats for the barrel, 2 coats for the bipod. Again, it covered really good, and I did like 1 very light coat for the coat and polish to the charging handle, because you can see most of the time they have a bit of a different finish. Because that was also the point, not get a whole like uniform tone for the whole gun, but get like this a bit dark, this a bit dark, this a bit lighter, this a bit lighter. Yeah. So again, very easy thing to do. Just have to take the whole thing apart, which, okay, it is long, that is true, but it's not complicated. You just have to spray it, be patient, let it dry, and it comes up pretty good. It has a very matte, very actually kind of gritty feel. It's not smooth at all, and I kind of like that. So yeah, it is a modification that I would recommend anyone to do, honestly. It's very easy, and I've seen people actually do it too with Panzergrau paint. Panzergrau seems to be a bit too light, so if you want to mix the two, maybe it's going to have a very nice look to it. But if you're going to just use one, I would still go with Grau Blau, but that's just my opinion, honestly. Well, that's really the gun itself. It has been through a lot, and it has been a very long project of mine, but I feel it's worth it, honestly. Now, the M60 still has a bunch of common issues that I have not mentioned yet. Arguably the biggest issue with this gun is well, other than the rampant lack of realism regarding the pieces, is the fragility, particularly the bipod and the bandolier plate. Because the original bandolier plate is fucking garbage. It is very poorly spot welded in place, and any moment you'll put any weight on the actual bag while it's mounted on the side plate, it is gonna detach, it is gonna break, and you're gonna have to buy a new one. So what I would recommend to you, if you end up, in that situation, I don't know where the fuck I put it, but just get another LCT plate, because they're like $40, I think it was. It was very cheap. Cheap for what it is, really, because $40 you can still like survive up for a week with that. It's just something that I recommend just getting it straight away. You get the gun, you get the plate, you replace it, you forget about it. That's it. Because that plate also allows you to, again, mount actual bandoliers on it, which the bandoliers are actually kind of smaller in profile than the actual, like, the A&K bag. And actually it makes it a lot more comfortable to carry, because the thing about the M60 with the bandolier is that you kind of have to like put yourself at a very weird angle, like to carry it, like a very sharp angle, instead of actually being able to carry it more comfortable like you would a rifle. And having a very long box kind of just forces you on a very weird position. And having the bandolier actually allows you some slack, some more distance that won't destroy your fucking shoulder. But yeah, that's just a recommendation I would do. So that's an easy fix, an easy replacement. Now, the big issue with these guns is always the bipod. Everyone always bitches about, oh, my bipod broke. Okay, there's a reason why. There's a very simple reason why. The legs of the bipod are actually steel. They are steel. They're good. They're magnetized. You put a magnet to it, it sticks. Good. That is good. They are stamped steel. Good. Okay. The real yokes were milled steel. Do you think a company that has recycled like all of the fucking parts of the gun is gonna go out of the way to mill out a block of steel to make a bipod yoke? No, they're not gonna do that. So, I mean, of course they're just gonna have it cast or milled out of a different fucking piece. And the piece that they used, different material. And the material that they use is basically an alloy between zinc and aluminium. It's an alloy that is very porous. It has a lot of holes in between, and that makes it very prone to breaking. And very prone to breaking at the lugs. It's going to most likely break just about here, either this lug or this one right here. That one or that one. And that is because you may go out and, just put it back and then pull back the gun or pull forward, and that is going to cause a substantial amount of damage to that lug. Yeah, it is not exactly the most strong and resistant part of the planet. However, do you want to know the secret to actually not breaking that part, is these are not real guns. These are not built to the same standard of a real gun. This is a toy. This is literally a man-child toy, nothing else. So don't treat it like a real gun. If you go out and just deploy the thing like an animal, if I'm just gonna get the M60 out and I'll fucking drop it like that on the surface, or like fucking ram it against the wall, yeah, it's gonna break. If you act like a troglodyte, of course it's gonna break, you dumb fuck. Like, you just have to be careful with it. Be conscious of what you're playing with. Okay, be careful, and it will survive. I had this gun for 2 years. I replaced the bipod. Well, I had the gun for more like 2 years and a half so far. I've been playing with it for 2 years, and it's holding fine, because when I go to a game, I'm like mindful. This is a toy gun. I'm not going to use the bipod. I'm not going to do anything stupid with it. I'm going to prioritize being safe. I'm going to prioritize having fun, and I'm going to prioritize not being an animal with it. And it's being conscious of what you have and not expecting this thing to be, oh, okay, it's an M60. It has to be super strong. Well, it isn't. This is kind of like, how would I put it? A white elephant. There we go. It seems tough. It seems cool. Wow, it's exotic. It's not something you see all the time. But you're going to have to take care of it if you want it to run for a long while. Okay? You do need to take care of these, and it needs babying. That's the way I would put it. You need to baby this gun, and you need to take a lot of care of it, including the bipod, including how you play with it. And that kind of just leads me into other ways to actually mitigate damage on this gun, damage or wobble or anything like that. First off, most easy thing is tighten the screws frequently. Tighten the screws on the trunnion, tighten the screws on the handguards. Try to tighten the pins as much as you can, because there's an actual issue with, there's a design issue, but it's not the designer's fault. It is the fault of the company that reproduces these. Because on a steel gun, it works fine. It makes sense, because you have your pins and everything is solid and it's steel, so it's not going to bend. On these guns, it's going to end up just wobbling. Okay, for example, you have your bipod kind of, just moves. You can rotate your gun on the bipod. And the bipod has steps. One step here that kind of engages on here, and one step here that engages on the other side of the front sight. And those steps there are to, stop the bipod from, rotating, pivoting in place. On a steel gun, it works fine because, it's steel. On an airsoft gun that is not made out of steel, well, that movement is going to end up wearing out the pins. And my sight, it kind of just moves a lot. So, yeah, this part is going to end up wobbling like crazy. The gas tube, I don't know if I can move it a little bit because I did shim it a little bit. But this part also starts wobbling, and that kind of just also leads me to the whole barrel wobbling a lot. One thing that I would recommend not doing at all on this gun is carrying by the barrel. You see a lot of people in NOM putting the M60 over the shoulders, deploying the bipod, and kind of just like, just carrying it like this. Which, okay, yeah, it's cool, yeah, it's very neat, but A, you're putting a lot of pressure on the bipod. A part that we've already stated is pretty fragile. It's not solid. So first off, don't, at least not by the bipod. And if you're carrying it by the barrel, you have to be extremely mindful of what you're doing, because again, you have a fairly fragile piece on a fairly fragile trunnion. I say fairly fragile because some parts of the gun are fragile by their own, such as the tripod, not the bipod, the carrying handle. I've seen these parts snap as well. Seeing the general fragility, I wouldn't risk it. I think the trunnion is solid, but I still wouldn't risk it. So if you're gonna carry it, over your shoulder, holding it by the barrel, I would be extremely careful, or just flat out not doing it. Simple as. Because honestly, it's not worth it to just kind of go out and end up damaging the barrel or damaging the trunnion, or there's not much point in that. One thing I also kind of recommend doing is shim the barrel. Just get some electrical tape on the base of the barrel that connects to the actual barrel release lever, and just put some electrical tapes, a few turns, and that will shim the barrel to a point where it will barely move, which is kind of something that you actually want to, because wobbly barrel is kind of sucky for accuracy or for just looks. Really, it's kind of, if you put it down and you can see the barrel is going up a bit, that is never a good sign, and that kind of is actually something That does happen to the gun, but at this level. This is why I would also limit leaving the gun like this for a very long time, because the gun will start just like bending downwards, because you know these screws do not really hold weight a lot. So yeah, just from time to time tighten those and make sure it's just not bending downwards. It's not necessarily dangerous, but you know, it can look a little dumb. Now, seeing the fragile nature of the bipod, one may be actually tempted to just go out and buy an original, or at least buy an original yoke, and fit them onto the gun, or maybe just go out and just get an LCT. But personally, I would avoid doing both of those, or three of those, for a number of reasons. Mostly regarding to the strain the extra weight can put on the barrel and the trunnion. Like we already said that those parts can be fragile, they can wobble. There's no need to put an extra weight at the end of the gun. Like, no. And then you're still gonna make the gun even more front heavy. It's gonna make it even more uncomfortable to actually carry it. So there's no real point to actually just going out and doing it. Then there's, regarding the subject of real parts, at least the real bipod. Okay, I do not feel putting a lot of real parts on an A&K is a good investment. Seeing that, you know, sizable M60 parts like handguards, buttstocks, top covers, trigger assemblies, etc. are very expensive. Anything M60 is remarkably expensive, so paying like a 3-digit sum for one piece of furniture for a gun that cost you practically the same or even less than, you know, the part that you're buying, it's not exactly worth it. I just do not feel there's a need for such parts to be installed. Maybe small parts that you cannot find repros of. The spring, for example, is a cheap part. It looks good. You cannot find a repro of these. The gas cylinder nut, for example, you cannot find those in repros, and you can get them for $10. So why not? But if it's a sizable part, there's not much point, unless it really adds to, you know, the utility of the gun. Speaking of that, I forgot to mention, I just thought about, you know, adding a real carrying handle. I haven't checked if you can do it. I need to check one day. But also, do not use the carrying handle a lot, because these parts end up bending. Like, I've seen these handles just go like this, because people tend to carry these for a long time. You can carry these, like carry the M60 like this for a while, but don't run with it, don't do anything dumb with it, don't carry it like this when there's a magazine on the side. Just be mindful of it. I mean, you can still take it off if it bends and bend it back into shape, because the part is steel too, like it's not this shitty alloy, so it's not gonna snap, but it will bend, it'll look kind of funny. So again, just be mindful of how you use that. And yeah, just getting back to the subject of real parts. Even then, finding parts that are correct for a Vietnam War gun. We're talking about, you know, a 1967 pattern of handguards, an early stock, an early handguard, an early top cover, an early bipod with a cast, with a stamped yoke. Those parts are very expensive, very, very expensive, and you have to find them too. Like, they seldom come around. So I just don't see the point of getting originals unless they are the actual good ones you will need. And even then, they're going to cost you more than the gun. So what's the point of doing that on the A&K? Maybe on the LCT, maybe a good idea, if you're fucking stacked, and if you find the parts, but it's not something I would recommend doing on this gun. Basically, the A&K is just a good base to modify and make a period M60 by your own means, without having to shell out and spend, you know, like a ridiculous amount of hours trying to fit real parts on it. Or, well, you may need special machinery, or you may need special tools. This is a very kind of handmade project, very arts and crafts, if you want to put it that way. Now, I'm probably going to do an internal report regarding the insides. So this is probably the part where I edit it in. So yeah, that's going to be that for that. So now getting to a more of like an internal look to the gun. The gearbox is very easy to take apart, and it actually has a quick change system for the spring. So that's your spring guide, which is actually very, very solid with bearings, which is always good. And now if I can get this spring out, there it is. Spring is out. Pretty good. I think this is actually the standard spring or a 110 spring, either or. So now I'm going to go take it apart. So on the inside, we've got just standard A&K gears. they're pretty good. I've never had an issue with them breaking or having any, well, these substantial damage to them in any way, shape, or form. Or I haven't really heard of those breaking. However, they can require some shimming. That would always do it some good. But yeah, the gears are actually pretty good and pretty solid too, which is surprising. As I said, I did change the spring for a 110 spring, if I'm not mistaken, and I put a top high torque motor inside. It's not the most expensive motor. It's fairly cheap too, and it works fine. Honestly, I haven't had an issue with it. So, something to keep in mind. One thing that now we're gonna get into parts that you have to change. Like, it's something I would just really recommend for you to actually change. Starting by the micro switch. You see, on light machine guns, you have a micro switch rather than a connection. For example, an AR-15 or an AR platform airsoft guns, you have a connector that actually comes in contact when you pull the trigger. Basically, the two connectors come together and they engage. Electricity goes through them and you can fire. On LMGs, at least, for example, the M60, you have a micro switch, making a bit of a funny noise when you actually press it together. The A&K M60 and its micro switch is fairly well known for having runaways, where you would pull the trigger, stop, and the micro switch will malfunction and it will continue shooting even if you stop pressing the trigger, which is never good. Honestly, it's pretty fucking bad. Changing a micro switch is really easy. Like, it is just taking a few connectors out, putting them back in. Same as changing a motor. It's not hard. And you don't have to deal with the not the angle of engagement, but the motor depth and height that those parts require. Like, it's a very easy change, a very cheap change too. So it's something that I most certainly recommend you to actually change. Now, the other thing that I would recommend to change is the, if I can get it out without taking everything out, is the, there we go, the piston. A piston with metal, steel teeth. These, the original pistons, the ones that come with the gun, are this like white plastic pistons, and this part of the back ends up just shearing off and breaking off of the piston, and that will require a change at some point. So it's better to just get a new piston and piston head. These are pretty cheap. I think I paid like, I don't know, $30 for the lot. Is an SHS piston and piston head, and it works honestly just fine. It is one part that is going to break at some point, so again, having a spare is always good. But the motor is so fucking strong, it's stuck to the piston's teeth. There we go. So I cannot be fucked to put it back together 100%. Now, another thing that I would recommend to change, or at least, and again, have spares, is the nozzle. The nozzle will end up breaking because the nozzle is held on the tapered plate, whatever you want to call it. It has a few like chew rings on each side, one on the inside, one on the outside, and that kind of locks on the tapered plate. I mean, anything that is clear plastic, you don't know it's gonna fucking break because it's fairly poorly made, fairly fragile plastic. The one that came with the gun originally broke. Same thing with the piston actually. So yeah, have a few spares. I think actually Airsoft Pro make metal pistons that you can put in there, like CNC aluminum machined, not pistons but nozzles, sorry, to put on these gearboxes. So if you can find those, get some, or at least keep like maybe 1 or 2 extra nozzles, just in case they break, because they will end up breaking eventually. That's just a given, honestly. One thing that I also recommend changing is the hop-up assembly. I took the barrel out as well because I'm going to an event and I don't need a fucking red flashy thing in my receiver. This is an Airsoft Pro CNC machine chamber, hop-up chamber. It is really good, honestly. It does help a lot with accuracy, range, and it was pretty cheap. It was like, I think $40, maybe even less. I forgot about that, but it's very easy to put on as well. It's not a hard thing to put in.
But yeah, that is pretty decent recommendation. I would decent thing I would actually go out and change. And also, one of the things that I did also change is, well, change, not really, just remove, is the MOSFET. The MOSFET on this gun's like under the barrel and the gas cylinder. You have a MOSFET that you can regulate, and you know this part moves. You can twist it, and it would regulate the fire rate of the M60. You can make it slower, you can make it faster. Yeah, that's cool, but I don't see the point, honestly. It can be more damaging than actually useful, so I decided to take it out because I heard some horror stories about these burning out gearboxes, and I'm not really in the mood for that. And it's just a little weight off the front, a little thing that will, because you can kind of see it through the vents on the gas cylinder, so may as well take it out. Like, just plug the cables, because if you don't plug it, it's not going to work, because it's not going to be a closed circuit. Usually the guns come with a plug to bypass the MOSFET. If not, you can find it on e-bike. I think like $2 or $3. It's not hard to find, so I just recommend just getting this out of the way. And one thing that I don't have in my hands right now, but it's worth mentioning, is the magazine. For me, the magazine has worked fine. I've never had an issue with it, and I've owned it for 2 whole years. Feeds fine, works fine. Sometimes has a few hiccups, but it's not a big deal. But it is a disposable part. It is known to breaking down, so I recommend at least having another spare magazine just in case the one you have breaks, because you know they're not the most electrically sound build machines. So yeah, that's another part that I would recommend just changing. And one thing that I forgot to mention is that when you're putting the gearbox together, there's 2 screws that are like slightly longer than the rest. These 2, if I can actually get them to stay still in my hand, these 2 are slightly longer than the rest of the screws. You can see there's like maybe 2-3 mil difference in there. Not huge, but these 2 screws are meant to be the ones that actually hold the micro switch in place. So just put these by the side, because if you don't put the screws right, the micro switch would wobble and it won't be too good. But yeah, it is, again, a very easy to take apart gearbox. It's not that intimidating. It's going to be a bit annoying to put the anti-reversal latch back in place, but that's just the same thing with like all fucking gearboxes. But it's very easy to take apart, very easy to change parts, very easy to swap parts, very easy to work on, really. So yeah, just I think it was my first, like, the first gearbox I actually worked on, and it's, you don't need to do a whole lot of things to get this gun running pretty good. So I mean, there's people that may want to pimp them out, put a lot of fancy internals. These do fine for me, honestly. I get like 340, and I get a good 30-40 meters. So personally, I'm pretty good with it, honestly. But yeah, that's it for the internals. So I'll just leave you for the conclusion.
Well, in conclusion, although some may just dismiss these guns as trash, they can be an excellent base to work on and get into gun DIYs. Seeing that actually working on these and modifying them can be relatively easy and very rewarding. Honestly, going from how it was before, if I can post a picture somewhere, and how it is now, well, it's just like night and day, honestly. It's a huge change, and I feel very satisfied with what I've done, and I'm sure many people would feel the same if they decide to go out and do their thing and have some fun, you know, maybe get your buddies to help you out, which is what I did. And I'm also very thankful for all my buddies that helped me out build this thing. There's my buddy Pacey, there's my buddy Jay, there's my buddy, all the buddies in the States that have helped me source parts like the spring. You know, it's just a very endearing project, and it can be a lot of fun, especially if you get more people involved. You see the progress of your build day by day, month by month, piece by piece. You know, it offers a lot of opportunities for fun experiences. It offers opportunities for learning about the gun, learning about the history, learning about the parts, the differences, and it also like opens the door for awesome builds to be made, and at all at a fraction of the cost than other guns, especially if you get a second hand like I did. It's, at the end of the day, a gun is only as good as you want it to be. So I generally encourage you guys to just go out and get tinkering, you know, see what you come up with. Just remember to actually have fun. Okay, that is the main thing, because this is a hobby after all, really. So if this video has just helped out someone, like, or motivated someone into going out and doing their thing with one of these guns, or modifying, another pattern of gun that this person might have, or learn more about the M60 and how to make it more accurate, or have the correct pattern of M60 for the period they're doing, I would be perfectly happy with that result, honestly. If just one person decides to repaint the gun, or change one part, or, oh, I want to finish the top cover this way, I'd be more than happy, honestly, because that is really the point, because, you know, it's all about improving, well, the community overall, really. So yeah, I hope this fucking essay wasn't, well, visual essay wasn't as fucking boring as it was to type it out, because goddamn, that was long. I got a fucking 15-page script in front of my face. But yeah, that's really all of it. And this is also kind of my first video on the channel, which I'm hoping is not a fucking too low of a standard. So yeah, hopefully there will be more things to come, although I do take my time to make these videos, because they usually require, you know, references and actual searching for references, finding them, quoting them right, you're double checking if they're actually correct. You know, and I need to have things worth showing, and that's not something that's going to happen all the time. So yeah, this is just one video that I really felt like making, because I thought it would be fun, not for me, but for other people that may be into the subject, because there's no real in-depth look into the A&K, the quirks it has, the things that need to be changed. There's just nothing like that out there, so I decided to just go out and do one of those. Maybe one day I'll like have a mental aneurysm and decide to do it in Spanish or in French, since I know lazy shits in other countries decide not to watch videos that are in English. So maybe, you know, if that helps people internationally to also improve their impressions, I may as well just do it, honestly. But yeah, that's it. That's all I got for today, and I just hope you enjoy it, and you like, share, retweet, subscribe, and add me on MySpace. I don't know, just whatever the fuck you guys do. So yeah, that's it.